Aloha nerds, I'm Jessica Nguyen, head of Contract Nerds. You're about to watch a recorded session from our Contract Nerds webinar series, where we break down real-world contract issues with experienced practitioners from across the contracts community. This session was designed to be practical, not theoretical, so whether you're in-house, in legal ops, procurement, or just working closely with contracts, you should walk away with insights you can actually apply. You'll find the presentation slides and any bonus materials mentioned in this session linked in the description below. Let's get into it. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're logging in from the world. Welcome to our webinar on smarter contract operations, hosted by Contract Nerds and sponsored by DocuSign. Thank you all for spending your valuable time with us today. Please share in the chat box where you're logging in from and a link to your LinkedIn profile if you'd like to make new connections with other fellow contract nerds. I'm logging in from Seattle, Washington. So naturally, it's early and I have my Starbucks coffee. For folks joining for the first time, Contract Nerds is a special community because folks join us from all over the world, share their knowledge generously, connect, and nerd out about contracts. And our community loves the chat, so feel free to ask your questions and share knowledge in the chat box. A little bit about me. I'm Jessica Nguyen, the head of Contract Nerds, and I've been drafting and negotiating contracts for 2 decades. And a little bit about Contract Nerds for some first-timers here. Contract Nerds is a blog, resource, and community dedicated to contracts. We provide practical, relevant, and expert-driven content through our website, our webinars, social media, and newsletter. We're with over 25,000 subscribers. If you're not yet subscribed, please do so and help us grow this community. The subscribe link will be in the chat so you can receive our weekly emails with free content and more learning resources. All right, today's topic of the day. Smarter contracting operations, the process first approach to doing more with less. We have 2 very special speakers for you, Patty Corey and Natasha Giuffre. Yes, we are all contract nerds here, but we also know that just because you are good at cooking and chopping vegetables, it doesn't mean that you'll have a strong dish if your recipe is bad or you bake at the wrong temperature. Process first, folks. Let me quickly introduce our speakers. Patty. Patty is a legal operations manager at Franklin Templeton with experience helping legal teams improve their operations, process, on legal spend management and contracts, and so much more. And you might recognize her from LinkedIn as a legal ops superhero and a regular contributor to Contract Nerds articles. Natasha. Natasha is the founder and fractional GC at Founders Counsel Legal Services, a seasoned GC, and she has extensive experience building out legal departments for startups. So you can imagine she's seen the Building the Contract Process movie several times. But more importantly, my favorite fact is both of our speakers today are on our Contract Nerds Community Council. Thank you both for being here and being on our council. All right, a couple more logistical items before we get to our content. I'm excited to get started, but first, a quick word from our sponsor, DocuSign, who has made it possible to offer this CLE accredited webinar to you for free. All right, let's run the video.
Hi everyone, I'm Megan Bradley, a lawyer here at DocuSign, and I'm thrilled to be joining you Contract Nerds today. As fellow contract pros, we all know that agreements are where the business actually happens and also where a lot of the friction lives. That's why I'd love to personally invite you to Momentum, DocuSign's annual conference focused on making agreements smarter, faster, and more secure. Momentum brings together legal, contract, and business leaders to share real stories, best practices, and hands-on demos, not just of DocuSign, but of how modern contracting teams are transforming the way they work. You'll hear from peers who are solving the same challenges you are, scaling legal support, managing risk, improving the value of your contracting function. The best part, Momentum is completely free to attend. So if you're looking for fresh ideas, inspiration, and a community that really gets contracts, please join us. To learn more and register, just scan the QR code on your screen. I hope to see you there.
Well, I'm excited to get started and let's get right into it. Patty, the mic is to you.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. This is like my first webinar, so thank you for giving me this platform. So before we get into the substantive content of today, I think it's really important to take a step back and realize where we are. So legal teams, we know, are asked to do so much more with not a lot of budget. We know that technology is really outpacing process maturity at most organizations, especially with AI. And we're under a lot of pressure to deliver faster, cheaper solutions with fewer resources. But I do have some good news for you. You don't need a bigger budget to fix your contract function. As we know, CLM in tech, it's just a mirror. If your process is not succinct, dialed in, it is just going to amplify all of the things that the process isn't doing to make legal work more efficient. So please, we are going to get into fixing the process before you actually buy a tool. So next slide. So here's a diagram here that I think really encompasses how we can think about process. And the reality is that it's going to be more on the left, that it's all of these different interconnecting dots, and you're going to be asking so many questions. So certainly like tech is shiny. It's an illusion of thinking that if your process is not actually like dialed in, like the tech isn't going to make sense for it. It's really something that you have to think about before buying tech, because it's not as easy as you think it is. Once you buy it, it's going to actually create even more confusion. So next slide. So what do you do to fix this? So there is a statistic in 2023 that came out through a study with Gardner that 50% of first-time CLM implementations fall short of expectations. And we really know the reason why. It's because contract processes were not audited first. So what does that mean? You need to fix these 5 things. So your intake, how are contracts actually coming into the process? Who is submitting? What information is required upfront? That is then going to feed into your approvals. If your approvals of basic, let's say, a SaaS contract needs to go to several layers of approvals, you need to have correct intake fields that are going to be able to fire those approvals once the intake form is submitted. That also gets into workflow and routing of how it actually goes through that middle part of the process of approvals and negotiation and actually interfacing with legal. The metadata. The metadata is so important because we know that the intake metadata is connected to your repository and how to run reports, because ultimately, especially if you're thinking from the perspective of even vendor contracts, you want to know when your contracts come up for renewal and termination so you actually can save money. You also want to be able to know this from a customer perspective, because you have terms and obligations to them, and you may want to reach out and make sure that they can get their renewal in so you can get your money. So the 5 of these things need to be fixed, and that only happens through actually auditing your contract process. So where do you start? Next slide. So here, I love this slide so much because I'm going to tell a story. I was told by a manager, a mentor of mine, I was having a lot of issues trying to figure out, how do I map, this process? It's so confusing. I'm looking at the data in front of me. It's not telling me anything. She stopped me and said, Patty, you need to actually talk to people. This is how you get your information. So please start with listening, not mapping. And what this is to do is that you're going to have conversations with people that is going to illuminate what processes you need to fix. And it's also going to unleash what friction is there, what bottlenecks are there. So you really need to go on a listening tour and to really talk to as much people as you can, because you want to understand who touches a contract from start to finish, really learning, are there any unwritten rules in your culture of contracting? And that really definitely connects to, I think, adhering to a contract process, and if there's any bottlenecks that needs to be fixed culturally. And you're also going to want to find any truth and contradictions across your teams. So really start with listening, not mapping. And I know it's so hard to do, but this is really where the work starts. Next slide. So next question, who do you meet? So here's a really nice cheat sheet that I was able to put together of just experience that I've had. So you're really going to want to talk to 3 buckets of people. So your business teams, operations and tech, and legal and people. So your business teams, especially from a customer perspective, sales, you want to understand how are deals flowing through, what slows them down, how the approvals work. Your revenue operations team also is going to be, a partner and figuring how you book that revenue, what guardrails are actually put in. It's closely linked to the sales process. Marketing as well, how legal review is going to fit into content review. You may want to build out a process for that and to really understand how that is working. And of course, operations and tech, procurement, IT and security, data engineering, that's all going to really feed into various different processes, especially with vendor contracts and reporting and metrics. Of course, data engineering can be able to help you with that too. And of course, your legal team. You want to understand, is legal reviewing everything? Do we have thresholds in place? Who is making the ultimate decisions with red lines? Do you have playbooks? You're going to be asking all of these different questions on your listening tour. Next slide. So another piece here, which I absolutely love, is that you need to find your other ops people early. And what I mean by that is that legal operations is operations. We're not just a specific breed of a person. There are other people within the organization that are operationally minded, just like you are. And it's important to leverage these people because they will be able to help you execute process. I'll tell a story for one moment. So I was speaking to a data engineer at a previous company that I worked with. He didn't touch any contracts, for example. I just wanted to get to know him. What is his expertise? And I really was looking at the work that he was doing, and he was building a lot of cool dashboards with like integrations and APIs and really building that out. And I wanted to figure out how could I do this for legal to create this story of legal that I could screenshot and put into a really nice PowerPoint deck, to show my general counsel. But this is of course, a process project. And I was speaking to him and he's like, oh, I can do that. I can connect the systems. I can do APIs, but I can't do it right now. I can do it next quarter. And I was like, that's awesome because now I have a quarter to figure out the process so then we actually can implement this dashboard. So really lean on your IT and data engineering people because they can tell you what the tools that are existing, what can really scale and what you can build in-house. And these people are going to be able to be your partners in helping you execute. Same thing with revenue operations. If you have a Salesforce integration with your CLM tool, or if you want to do that, you'll have to build out that process with them. So they will be your partners. Same thing with accounting operations in your procurement function as well, and making sure that they get the information that they need so then vendors can get paid. And you just got to find these people early because once you do, I promise you, you will be able to leverage the tools within your existing organization. Next slide. So here is the biggest challenge I see in legal ops is that you need to figure out when you're having conversations with both of your ops people and people that can be able to tell you, the current processes, or if there are none at all, you're going to find that there's going to be conflicting views. So if we look here, I think a lot of people can recognize and even relate to that sales can sometimes say that legal slows down deals. But legal says, our review thresholds are really well defined, and you're going to have all of these different like conflicting opinions and feelings. And your job is going to be you have to find the truth in the middle of all of these because someone's feelings, you can validate them, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that is the operational truth of what is actually going on, which leads into the next slide of a model that I have created to help you actually tease out how do you find the operational truth in everything. Next slide. So here is the 3 truths model. So as I said before, you have to find the overlap in all of the things that are being told to you. And I know it's harder than it sounds, but this has really helped me figure out how do you find that truth. So first of all, there's going to be an emotional truth. Legal rejects everything. They, are making it so difficult for me to do my job. All of these things that we've heard about, that can be valid. They can feel that way, right? But there's also a spoken truth. What people say is actually the issue, but emotion isn't attached to that. It's actually what's happening in the process. It's approvals are killing deals. And then what we know is the operational truth can be is actually what the workflow and the data is showing us what happens, in which, in this example, most delays happen before legal even gets the request. That is the operational truth, but both the emotional truth and spoken truth help you get there. So try to think, what does it feel like that's happening? What are people saying out loud that's the issue? And what is the workflow and the data actually telling you? And you'll be able to get to the heart of what that truth is. Next slide. So you ask, Patty, I have to have all these conversations with people. Like, what do I ask? So here is a cheat sheet for you that you want to capture the following during your listening tour. And this can happen over several weeks. It doesn't have to happen in one conversation. You're probably going to be going back to the same person a few times to tease out what that process really looks like. So you want to understand the real life cycle from request to signature of a given contract, who is owning each step, the delays, where this occurs, where is there bottlenecks, there's friction, any tools or templates that, a business team might be leveraging, procurement if they're doing, let's say, a level of commercial review before it gets to legal, and where cross-functional handoffs are happening, and where the business needs things to really speed up. And I see we have a poll coming through, if we want to recognize that.
Yes, we do, Patty. So, folks, please drop a response to our first poll. What is the biggest thing slowing down your contracts process down right now? And it looks like, oh, it's not a clear winner, but the leader right now, Patty, it's probably not going to surprise you, is the intake process. Like requests for contracts are coming in from all over. It's email, it's Slack or Teams, it's Jira, it's Salesforce tickets, and your CLM may even have an intake flow. I mean, that's no less than 5 at least forms. I'm also getting text right now because it's my current employer's end of quarter. So sorry, sales, you're gonna have to wait till after my contract nurse webinar. All right, so it's intake, and we have a process, but nobody follows it. Does this result surprise you?
No, it doesn't surprise me. And I think that is a change management and training piece. And many times that comes from the top down as well. Leadership also has to support that too. And those are like larger conversations that also you should be having with, your legal team, whoever is the head of legal, your general counsel, CLO, things of the like.
Yeah, it's a challenge.
It's such a challenge. But I want to say here that you do not need to fully process map yet. The simple list of notes that you're getting in these conversations is all you need, because you're going to take that and then actually start to process map when the time comes. So we can go to the next slide. So another piece I want to bring up, what I've really had to learn is that you can't be talking to everyone all at the same time. You have to create the mental space to actually see the system. A lot of what legal ops is, it's invisible work. It's having these conversations behind the scenes. It's collecting all of this data. So these are a few things that I still use. And it's really coming from just experience of burning myself out, to be honest with you. So first of all, pace your conversations. Do not overbook your stakeholder calls, because you will burn out and you will get confused, and it's not going to be productive for you. So a better approach that I like to use, especially if you're doing your first 30, 60, 90 days, check out my Contract Nerds article on that. one person per day for 3 weeks, for example, it gives you 15 stakeholder interviews. That can uncover so much data. And that is something that is sustainable. You're going to be creating that mental space so then you're not burning yourself out. Also, using the 3-question reflection framework, I use all the time when I'm having conversations. So you can do it in a few different ways. So you can, have a transcript of the recorded call and upload it into AI and ask it, what did I hear? What didn't I hear? And what did I almost hear? Because you may find that you have to go back and ask those questions of what didn't I hear? What are some questions I still have based on this? What did I almost hear, but I'm not so sure and I need to validate what is being said because you don't want to make assumptions. So you can ask AI that, please verify it. And you also can ask yourself on that. And that's kind of the way that you can verify the information. The next one is like make a 3 key things log a non-negotiable. So what I do after every single stakeholder call that I have is that I write down 3 things that I have learned about that contract process. And I place all of those notes into OneNote. I am old school that I love OneNote and I just make a tab for each person, each department, when I spoke with them, and I actually write down the key 3 things because then it's going to help me remember. And then I can also use the framework of what did I hear, what didn't I hear, what did I almost hear to figure out what questions do I still have to actually go back to them, or what are things that I'm really clear about and I don't need to ask about again to be the most efficient. Next slide. So here's another piece to this, okay? I love country music, and so I find a lot of my inspiration of creating these frameworks from actual country music songs. So after your initial conversations, please resist the urge to map everything at once. Morgan Wallen had a hit song, hit album, 2023, one thing at a time. And so it goes one thing at a time, right? We want to say one contract type at a time because it keeps your work manageable. It helps you spot handoffs, delays, and friction really more clearly in that process. And you're just able to be clear about what's actually happening in the process before you map it. Also trying to map everything all at the same time is just going to make you have the legal ops spinnies. You're going to get so confused. So please get the lay of the land first and map one thing at a time or one contract thing at a time. Next slide. So now we get into the nitty gritty of actually how do you map a contract workflow. So you're really going to start from intake all the way to repository. You may not have any of that, and that's okay, but you need to understand where you are. So intake, like we said, is it coming through shared drive, someone's desktop, email threads? Map your full life cycle all the way from intake, execution, and storage, and the reporting of it. And then still identify those touch points of who is touching contracts, when do they, what are the handoffs, and that is how you're going to map the contract workflow. But, I'm not going to just tell you this and, you're going to go off and do it. I'm going to help you actually do it with a template. Next slide. So I love using swim lane templates to really visualize the process because it's a really simple way that workflow is going to move across teams, especially when contracts are cross-functional, which we know they are. They're relationships and handoffs, even in the company that we work in, as well as the people that we interact with externally. So you're going to use it to see who is owning each step, the delays, handoffs, where the process is unclear and inconsistent. So I love using a swim lane template. The swim lane template that I'm going to share with you is actually an iteration that I got from my operations class when I was getting my MBA. And then I just optimized it, for my own uses and then optimized it again for your use. Next slide. So this is a sneak peek of a swim lane template, and I have optimized it with different annotations so you can understand really how to use it. And this is a vendor contract example. So to quickly go through the template, on the left-hand side, you're going to have your stakeholders. And then on the top of the screen here, you're going to see intake, business review, legal review, approval, signature, post-signature. There could be other people that are involved as well, but for the sake of an example, and you're going to see that you're going to start with intake and who is the owner. business owner. And then where is it going to post signature all the way down? And you're going to see that also the diamond boxes here is when a decision has to be made. So, if they submit a contract, business review is happening. Is it on standard paper? Yes or no? Yes, go to fast route tracking. No, review terms and red lines. And you're just going to follow this, through and create the process map here. And I've annotated things for you here. So next slide. I'm not just going to show you this and tease you. You're actually going to get this template for coming to this webinar. So you get a template, you get a template, you get a template. And it's going to outline every single thing for you, and a few different examples. I'm really, really excited for you to use this template. I would love your feedback. But now I'm going to pass this off to Natasha.
Hi, everybody. I am so thrilled to be here. I have been a contract nerds groupie for like, I don't know how long. So this is like, I feel like I'm like getting a chance to be a Hollywood star here for a moment. So I'm very excited. So thank you for having me. And also, I promise I will not sing because I cannot sing the way Patty does. So that was so amazing, Patty. Thank you so much. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so I realize entirely that the title of this slide says process first. And I'll tell you, I actually started an engagement with a client a few months ago, and I was meeting with some of the senior stakeholders, and we talked about things we wanted to do. And I must have used the word process 12 times in the first 5 minutes of the conversation. And finally, he said, look, like, process is a bad word around here. People think that if you're going to use the word process, that you're just going to slow everything down. Like what that means is a bunch of bottlenecks that you're creating, and nobody wants that. So you have to find another word. And I get that. But I think really what the miscommunication is that bad processes do that, right? So, or no processes a lot of the time, but the right one designed properly can just do a world of magic for your departments. So, one of the first things I do in a new engagement is ask, where do your contracts live? Where are they? Where can I find them? Pull back the curtain and show me. And if it makes you feel any better, I have yet to work with a client that has a beautiful repository. So if your contracts live on people's desktops and in email and in a shared drive that no one has maintained in years and years and years, you are not alone. That is just the common, issue that happens, especially in early stage companies, because everyone wants to be so helpful and pitch in, but there isn't a lot of hygiene when it comes to the work product. So you're not alone. And then really you want to think about how you're going to actually do your work. Because at the end of the day, processes are great if people follow them. But you can have the most beautifully designed process that nobody follows and it just all goes, down the toilet. And so you need to think about that. And also, like, what's going to stick? What are people going to use all the time? What is really most important? Where you're going to get value? Where is your low hanging fruit? I have people ask me all the time, is there software you can recommend that will like fix everything for us? No, there isn't. There are amazing software tools out there that can do so much, but they can't fix the mess you have right now. Like we always hear with software and tools, garbage in, garbage out. You have to sort of clean house and get your house in order before you can use amazing tools. And honestly, a lot of time people end up with tech stacks. They don't even know what's in it anymore because they got the tool that they thought was going to be like the magic wand for all of their problems. It didn't work. It didn't get adopted. And then we just forget about it. And you don't have a great contract management system. So when auto renewal comes and goes, you're none the wiser because you had no way of knowing that it was going to happen. So very common problem. Next slide, please.
Hi, nerds. Jessica again. Quick pause before we continue. If this session is helpful, I encourage you to subscribe to the Contract Nerds YouTube channel and newsletter. We regularly share full webinar recordings, practical contract breakdowns, info about free upcoming events and CLEs on contracts, along with conversations featuring contract professionals from around the world. Subscribing helps you stay up to date, and it also helps us continue to provide free, high quality contract education for the community. You can also find the slides and bonus materials for this session linked below. All right, let's jump back in.
So start, stop, and simplify. And, Patty talked about this in different terms already, but really, where do you start? This is where most legal teams, I think, and most companies in general have the most to gain. And that is going to be your intake process. And this comes in two different ways, okay? It comes to the one where we've discussed already, where you have 10 different types of intake, right? I know that I have to tell you, Microsoft Teams and Slack, like I love the tools in theory, but not for intake. It is just very challenging, I want to say, for a legal department because there's no way of really like saving that knowledge. There's no way of organizing it and going back to it in a really meaningful way. And if you have things coming through email, like we've talked about, like Jessica said, text messages or Slack or team messages, it just gets to be a disaster. That being said, having one way won't solve your problem if it's not the right way. Okay. So I had one client who their whole intake system was just email. They had a legal at email inbox, and that's where their request would come in. But the problem was that they had too many requests. And so they couldn't track them. They couldn't tell what had been done, what hadn't been done. And something like an email inbox is great if you only have one person on your team, but if you have a number of people you're working with, like how do you keep track? So really, it's not only just, do I have one intake method, but is that method working for me? Is it doing what our company, what our department needs for it to do? A lot of times it's not. And then legal spends more time managing the noise of, where are we with things and actually doing work. And so you want to simplify, reduce steps. Okay. You don't want to have to email 10 people in a chain. You don't want to try and have to ask emails to figure out or send messages to figure out what is the correct process for something. You want to simplify it. It should be like the idiot's guide to getting your legal work done. Next slide. Bottlenecks and scattered requests. And so I talked about this a little bit a moment ago with the last slide. And I saw someone in the chat say Jira and then PTSD. And I get it. I get it. But I have to tell you that, you don't have to spend a lot of money. Sometimes you have to use what you have. And sometimes also you need to meet the business where they are. And I think that's a really important point is that, I think that everyone involved in legal processes and legal departments like things done a certain way. I know I do. I really have a preferred way of doing things, but that isn't always matched by other people in the business. And so sometimes you have to meet people where they are. And so I can tell you very recently, I actually built a legal intake service desk in Jira for a client. And they think it's the best thing since sliced bread because everybody in the business is already used to using Jira. And they just felt so thrilled that we were using one of their toys to actually do this. And everyone was really on board. So I think that, you really want to think about not just the symptom and the cause of not having something standardized, but also the solution that you're working towards. Is that something that everyone else is really going to want to use? You want to have consistency and accountability. And for that to happen, people have to use it. Next slide, please. Poor tracking. Okay. And like, this is a killer. Everyone assumes somebody else is doing the work. It's kind of, or like, you hear these social theories about people standing around and watching an accident and nobody calls for help because everyone thinks somebody else is calling for help. I see that all the time in legal, especially when you have larger projects, like if there are big RFPs that are being worked on by a group of people, or if you have security questionnaires and you need to have a bunch of people from security and privacy and other people contribute, there has to be a way to track who does what. And it doesn't matter what tool you're using. It could be software, it could be ClickUp, it could be Notion, it could be Jira, it could be an Excel spreadsheet or some other kind of spreadsheet. It really doesn't matter, but it has to be really clear and really explicit who on your team owns what. And there has to be an expectation of when those things are going to be completed. And that brings me on to the next bottleneck. Next slide, please. And this is the unknown status. The unknown status, I feel like, is the plague of everyone's life, right? Because if I didn't have to answer text messages and Slack messages and Teams messages and emails about what the status of something is, I could actually do the thing that they're checking on the status of and then get back. I think we all have had that experience where it's like, if you didn't ask me about it, I would have the time to work on it. And that's a failing, on my part, if that's me in that position, because I need to make sure that I am providing an opportunity for everyone to know what is happening. And that's how you build trust. And I think that's really important, especially between legal teams and sales teams. I feel like that, a lot of times there's, jokes about legal and sales not getting along. When I am starting with a company, I want to hug the salespeople. I mean, I love the salespeople. That's how we all get paid. That's how the world keeps going. But you have to build that trust. They want to know, sales wants to know that you haven't forgotten about them. And you have to be able to create a mechanism to show what the live status is of something. And of course, you're going to want to do that with SLAs. So let's get to the next slide, please. Prioritization. Okay, so I had a client who said to me, Natasha, we already have a way of prioritizing. We have an intake form. I'm like, that's great. Let me see what it looks like. And on the intake form was a checkbox that said urgent. And so if someone felt that their intake, their ask was urgent, they would check the box and that would let legal know that it was important. Well, spoiler alert, everyone checked the box for every single request because it was, of course, every request was important to them. And so if everything is important, nothing is important. And so just don't do that. That's not the way we want to prioritize things at all, okay? If you're looking at sales, you actually want to sit in on those sales meetings and find out what is coming through the pipeline. If you're approaching end of quarter and there's one or two deals that are really going to get you to meet your target, then those are the deals that need prioritization. So the first tip I'll say for that is, look, like, don't just rely on people to give you the information. Seek that information out yourself. As part of the team, you're not just having to stay in behind your desk. Move out with the rest of the businesses and find out what they're doing. That's the first thing. Second thing is that you want to ask questions that are actually meaningful to help you make the determination of what it is. Now, sometimes those questions, depending on your business, are going to have to go with, a quantum of money in some way, whether it's revenue or spend. Sometimes not. I can tell you some of the scariest things I've seen have been the quietest things. Okay. So for example, around data, purchasing data, a lot of companies that want to purchase data or companies that are selling data in an appropriate way, but they sneak that into contracts and you don't know. Sometimes I'll have someone say, I want to purchase this thing. And I'm like, great. What does it do? Well, it's going to make my life wonderful. That's great. But how? Right? I need to know, is it going to touch PII? Is it going to have access to our systems? What is the security certification? These are things to know. So depending on what process you're managing and depending on what the contract is related to, you're going to want to think about what are those actual data points that matter to me for this. They're going to help me do my job, and then make sure you ask the appropriate questions to get those data points. Okay, next slide, please. A contract worksheet, routing worksheet. Okay. And so I don't have Patty's flair, but you are getting my contract routing worksheet. It is the same one that I use with every new client engagement I go through. You need to understand approval steps and risks and triggers and all of that. And so you're going to get that today. But instead of taking you through the worksheet first, I'm going to tell you how to use it. And I learned this in marriage class. Okay. So, yes. So before I got married, I was engaged and we were forced to take marriage classes. I would like to say that it was my idea. It was not. But one of the activities was a task questionnaire. So essentially, my fiance and I each had a list of household chores, and we had to write down next to the chore whose responsibility we thought that was. So, for example, who in the relationship would take out the garbage, who was responsible for cleaning toilets, who would fill up the gas tank. And so I would write what I thought I would do and he would do, and then we had to exchange them to see if we were both on the same page. So I have to tell you, I learned a lot. I'm glad for the quiz, but I would also say that the routing worksheet that I give you, you should do a marriage exercise with your teams. Okay. So rather than using it as a way to just design what you think the ultimate one is, what you need to do is have a meeting with all of your stakeholders, provide them the worksheet, and ask them to complete it in the way that they think represents the process now. Okay. Because on that worksheet, you're going to understand what they think a no-go is, what they think a term is that'll provide friction, what they think slows things down, who they think owns a particular part of the process. And then you don't have to exchange them, but you can look at them all at once. And it's a really meaningful exercise to find out where people's minds are without having to guess. Very similar to the exercise Patty suggested with the note taking, but in a bit of a different way. And if I can gamify things, I'm all for gamifying things. So that's definitely something I think you're going to have a lot of fun with. Next slide. All right. So redesigning for less friction. And so my biggest thing here is really, do you need legal for everything? And I feel like this is a question that a lot of lawyers, myself included, we have to ask ourselves, okay, are there things we can just like let go of? And depending on the personality, maybe the answer is like, absolutely not. But in reality, most cases are absolutely, okay? You know, you have to trust at some point. I can tell you through immense amounts of therapy, I have come to this realization that you can let things go. You know, you're going to work with a bunch of really smart, amazing people who are very talented and who are all adults. I promise you, at least most of the time. And, you know, you can trust that people can figure this out. So what really does not need the touch of a lawyer? You know, like, I mean, honestly, if you want to buy lunch, I don't need to know about that. I mean, you can get whatever lunch you want. If you need to buy like a standing desk, I don't need to review that contract. I'm pretty good with you doing that on your own. Probably like not agreeing to do work for hire without my purview would be my preference. You know, not creating deliverables that will belong to somebody else. I'd want to know about that first, that kind of thing. But I mean, whatever your business is in, there are surely things that don't need you, or at least not beyond a particular threshold. And that really is redesigning for less friction, because if it doesn't have to slow down or it doesn't have to go through another step, then you really need to get rid of that right off the top. And I think, honestly, this is really just a reflection exercise in most cases, because I think if we're honest, there's a lot of things that just don't have to go through legal. They can be, and that's not to say they won't have any oversight, but they could have oversight through a different department. And so consider who your allies are. Like Patty said, who else is on your team? Who are the people that you can go to and use their talents? Okay, next slide. All right, your contract ops toolkit. Okay, so there are 3 tools that will used well will solve most of your operations problem. The first is the self-service template. It is the first thing I build when I am working with a new client. if there is some low-hanging fruit, something that I can show a win with right away, that's what I want to do. I actually wrote a LinkedIn post about one early this week where it was simply about a sales order. So I had a client who, no matter what, whenever a salesperson wanted to send an order form to a client, it would go to legal first. They weren't able to complete it on their own. And I was like, guys, why is that? And they said, well, sometimes, through no fault of their own, they forget to put something in the order form that needs to be there. And I was like, look, simple checklist, right? Like flights, like in aviation, they're using checklists all the time. So let's use a form. Let's have the form auto-populate into a templated document, and let's even have it automatically get routed to someone's email or a version of it saved to our shared drive. That's something we can do off the top. It takes out at least 3 steps. I have to tell you, the look on the stakeholders' face when we were speaking was just like, I thought they were going to propose, but I said I was already married. So we just took that off, right? But they were so happy because it was something so simple, and they just they didn't think of it. And not because they're not super smart, but because they're thinking about other stuff. So definitely self-serve template. Next, negotiation playbooks. Now, I have a bit of a pet peeve about playbooks because with playbooks, a lot of people think it's just about, if someone on your legal team is reviewing a contract, you want them to have a comment about what terms they can change or can't, or what their fallback positions are. And yes, that's all important for a playbook. But in my view, playbooks are actually for the rest of your teams. I mean, legal for the most part knows what they're doing. Your playbooks are for your salespeople. And I always accompany my playbooks with the simple non-legal translation. So indemnification, what does that mean? What are these carve outs? What's limitation of liability? What can we move on and what can't we, and why? And I feel like when you do a little bit of teaching and your teams really know what these things are about, that they feel very invested and they're going to champion them for you. So, you're not going to have someone say to you, can't we just sign this? Because they're going to understand what's involved, and they're going to be there for you. And then standardized workflows. Just create a path of how something needs to get done, but don't just create it, document it. Whatever system your team is using as an institutional knowledge reservoir, that's where you need to put this information. Because as we said at the very beginning, a system is amazing as long as people use it. If no one uses it, then it's an epic fail, no matter how great it is. Next slide. Quick wins and long-term investments. Okay, so I want to prove my value right away. I have various engagements that I do every year. And so I want to get those quick wins, not just for myself, but for the team. Okay, everyone feels good when they know that there's momentum, that something is moving. And it doesn't have to be an expensive thing. Okay, the legal service desk I mentioned earlier, the one on Jira, that let my client have her first real vacation in 4 years. I mean, she actually came back from her vacation and said, this is the first time I've come back and I don't feel like I'm being punished for going on vacation, because it was just so easy to see where things are. A one-page guide telling people what needs are legal versus what doesn't can cut interruptions significantly. At the end of the day, though, I think it's really important to keep in mind that quick wins matter because they build credibility while you're working towards long-term investments. Next slide. Oh, we have a poll.
We do. And great timing too. We have about 10 more minutes left, folks. So we will offer the CLE code number 2, 5 minutes before the end of the session. All right, poll number 2, folks. Where do most contract requests land today? I have a guess. Natasha, what's your guess?
Oh, I don't know. There's too many places. I would say we're still probably something to do with intake for sure.
My guess was shared email, because email tech has been around. Email has been around for a while. So I think most legal teams that I've worked at or have spoken to, we have a legal at alias. But then we also get supplemented by the fun, hey, quick Slack question or quick Slack request or Teams request. And it looks like 43% of folks have a legal inbox or a shared email, and 31% have actual ticketing intake system. Probably a lot of Jiras because they have to inherit that from an existing tool. And then 25%, honestly, wherever people feel like sending them. So, hey, sorry, folks. That's also a world I lived in. I think we all empathize with that. Well, fun. All right.
That
Well,
I
yeah, go
saw
ahead.
Carrie again. That was amazing.
All right, Natasha, a few more minutes left, but
Yeah.
I love hearing your process and your stories.
So let's go forward. So I'm going to go a couple of slides forward in the interest of time. So next slide, please. Okay. And so I think something really important that I want to highlight for people are naming conventions. Okay. The slides I had before this one talked about, our metadata and the actual data fields that are really important to what we're doing. And to that end, just, as I said, fast forwarding, I have actually seen file names called "This is it for real this time." Okay. Like, I have seen the most amazing file names you have ever seen. And like, yay for creativity, but that does not help. So please stop building folder structures that are like a mystery novel. And it's like, oh my gosh, what am I going to get in here? Is it going to be like someone's family vacation picture, or is it actually going to be a contract? So next slide, please. And then clean in batches. I am a big Marie Kondo fan. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Marie Kondo. I'm all about organizing. And she says, like, organize by category. Okay. So don't just open up one drawer in your house or one folder or share drive and try to make it right. Try and scoop up everything in the same category. And this is one of my biggest tips. And that is start with a category. So if you're just going to address NDAs, just do that. Find them all, assess them all, create new templates, do what you got to do. Don't try and do it all at once because it just won't work. Next slide. And again, as we talked about, no AI is going to be the magic fix for you. If you haven't cleaned your house and fixed your process, an AI tool isn't going to make it better. I hear this all the time, Natasha. Surely there's some AI that can fix this. AI is amazing, but no. Immediately, no. You have to do the work. Someone has to do the work. Generally, it ends up being me in most cases. But AI has some great uses. It can refine some amazing things for you. It can filter through templates, through contracts, things you're looking at, but it cannot do the organizing that you need at the start to really have these tools power up your processes. Next slide.
All right, we have one last poll, folks, for the day. Poll number 3, how is your team currently using AI in your contract work? All right, any Patty, any guesses, or Natasha, where we're going to land here? Uh-oh. Patty, you look nervous.
I think people are probably experimenting with it, but not too far along. That's what I think.
Oh, you know what, Patty, you're right. I mean, if we were a game show, you would win a prize. 47% said experimenting informally, no real process around it. And then another half, we're not 22% not using it yet, AI, and then 26% using it for specific tasks like drafting or review. So the world is still experimenting and learning about AI despite all of the news of that AI is going to take our jobs and replace humans. Doesn't seem like it just yet.
I get a lot of questions about, like, I just dropped this into Chat GPT or to Claude, and this is what it said. What do you say? So I feel kind of like I'm, it's a bit of a force sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
Or
Well,
using it as an argument for something, right? Saying it said this, so what do you say? What's your counter?
Right.
It's happened
Yeah.
to me before.
Me against the AI.
Yeah.
All right. Next slide. Okay, putting it all together, Patty did a lot, gave you a lot of amazing points on listening and auditing and building as well. And I think that really, like, we just can't underscore this enough. You need to find out from people what they want to do, what they've been doing, what their complaints are, what the wins are. You want to audit it and you want to build. One thing I would add is take it on a love tour when you're done. Whatever you're working on, take it on a love tour. make sure that all of the different departments you're working on see it, understand it, and are liking it. I mean, I can tell by someone's face when they're like, absolutely not. If I see that upside down smile, I am like, this is just going to crash and burn. Okay. Everyone has to love it. And if they don't, you're going to have to tweak it until they do to make it work.
All right, some Q&A. So folks, please stick around if you would love some hear from our speakers on some Q&A items. There's some great questions here. All right, Natasha, Patricia, are you ready? One great question. This got me thinking about buy-in. Biggest issue we have. So this is from Brian Lindenbaum. Biggest issue we have as a Fortune 100 company is getting buy-in from various stakeholders in the contracting process. Will be a Sisyphean task. That's a big word. I don't even know what that means. What is the best way to get buy-in for a cross-functional platform like a CLM? Ooh. Don't just jump in all at once and answer that fun question.
Yeah, so I feel like Sisyphus with the boulder sometimes. So like I feel the pain there for sure. What I want to say is I never go from 0 to 60. I'm always trying to start small. So before I make any like financial investment or super time investment, I kind of try and do little nuggets along the way that slowly improve things so that people can start seeing change. Because I think, again, like change is hard for people for very different reasons. And you have to show that there's going to be real value there. And I think that's really the key. If you can show value, you can say, hey, you love this so much. Well, imagine this times 100, what that will look like. And so that's what I would say. It's like getting a scared deer to come to you. You got to be really, really slow and delicate, small nuggets, and you can get there ultimately.
Great.
Yeah, I agree. Even in my experience, like I've built like a CLM Lite, like within SharePoint as like a contract request management site after doing all the process mapping. And it was able to create like a case for CLM to say, this is what it's done for us. Like, look how much it's optimized it. But like it, like you said, Natasha, it'll be this, but like turbocharged. Like we need to go into this. And it's about creating like meaningful change and being able to say to leadership, we've done everything we can do. We really need the budget for this. So think about SharePoint. I know people have their opinions, but I've used it for contract request management sites. You can build it in Power Automate. You can do it. It can work in a light basis, to then make the case later.
Yeah. And there's also Google Forms to a sheet. I mean, there's
Oh,
various
yeah.
there's various tools that you can Frankenstein together until you get the buy-in and the budget for a more formal tool. All right, one more question from Mohammed. We have, what is your perspective on requiring validation of a bona fide business need prior to contract submission? This could include confirming executive sponsorship, budget availability, applicable AI or cybersecurity approvals upfront. Someone's been chasing and doing the quarterbacking sounds like for the business. Been there, done that. While this approach differs from traditional contracting practices, I'm interested in your view on whether it would improve efficiency, risk management, and alignment. Any thoughts there?
That's a great question. What I will say is I don't think it's ever legal's job to get involved in whether or not it's a business need. And I know like there's different views on that. That's my personal view. But what I usually do is make sure that whatever contract workflow that I have, if there's spend requested, that somebody is approving that. But I want that to happen before it even gets to legal. I feel like when we get to legal in a workflow, it should be because we're at the point of contracting, not where we're still in the decision-making progress about the spend or the buy. And additionally, when it comes to security, I think security and legal work so closely together just by virtue of the age we're in and the amount of security that goes with a lot of buys, especially software spends. And so what I would say is in those cases, that's where your data and your intake process is really going to do the heavy lifting for you. You need to know what it is that you're concerned, what's being concerned, and also what that involves, because there are some things that we can vet out that don't need security to have a look at in many circumstances. But things like, is there PI? Is there data sharing? Where are servers located? Who are the processors? That kind of stuff is going to be really important.
I think you really like covered it all. Like I mean, the only thing I can say is that, it has happened to me where, the businesses come to me of like, oh, we want to integrate our ERP. Like we see so much value in it. And I think it has to come from the business to want to do that. And then you can, help with the process of like if another approval has to be built in to then catch any like spend or buy. But that really should come from the business because as we know, like contracting is like one piece of the pie. It's that negotiation piece that we're looking at. And then the repository, it's not everything to do with the spend and the buy. It's a small piece of it.
Yeah, I think the challenge, folks, is for smaller companies, you don't have a formal procurement function or a formal deal desk manager who knows how to do that triage. Hey, I saw in the intake form that this vendor processes personal data and stores our data, so we need security review. So someone in marketing or someone in sales is not going to know to do that process. So I think that's an ongoing challenge for all of us here. One more question before we wrap is from Christy Russell. Any suggestions for when a company culture requires large stakeholder meetings? Oh no, always approval by consensus. That sounds awful. Sorry, Christy.
Boy, that's like I don't have a wand for that one or
Yeah.
like a lamp with a genie in it. But what I will say is that I think mapping is really important. I think this goes back to who is going to be affected. So I kind of work backwards from this. I want to have my, presentation on, who needs to be involved in the decision making to conform to who is truly going to be affected. And I think that there's a distinction there. But I think when you're doing that information collecting the way that Patty suggested, and you understand what everyone's role is, that you should be proposing who the decision makers should be, rather than saying, hey, everybody, what do you think? As soon as you start asking people to give their opinions, they will. And that's fine. That's just human nature. So I try to avoid those open-ended invitations for discussion. I want to be really precise in getting the appropriate input.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like when the question posed, I was like, do you really have to have that big meeting? Like, can't you just get the right people like in the room? I know it's harder, it's easier said than done, but I think creating a task force and really making sure that you have like a direct line to leadership because they also can be able to make sure that the task force is able to that they have the authority to make the decision and they have leadership buy-in to do that because just because you have a task force doesn't mean that like, oh yeah, they approve something, where's the backing to it? So I
Right.
think definitely being able to communicate with leadership and to have a direct line is also very important.
And there's so many project management methodologies to really narrow that room. It could be who owns the decision, who are the reviewers, who are just the folks who just need to be informed about that we're doing this, but don't have the decision making capability. So getting alignment there will be helpful as well. So you don't have 100 people on an email thread or in a meeting and nothing gets done. Well, Natasha and Patty, it was so wonderful to have both of you speak on this webinar. You're fantastic. And also, thank you so much for sharing your insights with hundreds of nerds today. And also just being a part of our community council too. And you'll be able to contribute in so many more ways as well. And thank you, everybody who have joined and engaged in the chat. We're so grateful you spent an hour with us. Enjoy your free CLE and all the freebies that will be coming your way after this webinar via email. Nada@contractnerds.com. Make sure you can get her emails from her. Thank you all. I hope to see you in person next month. And if not, and online in June for our next Contract Nerds webinar. Aloha, everybody, and stay nerdy.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.